Lucas Morrow had always envisioned having a family, though he never anticipated it occurring in this manner. He was a reserved man leading a modest life in a small town in France, working as a carpenter. His days followed a predictable pattern, waking up early, enjoying coffee by the window, and spending extensive hours in his workshop crafting furniture for the town's residents. Yet beneath the surface, there was an emptiness he could not ignore, a yearning for something more. That yearning evolved into a calling. Today, he discovered the plight of 3 abandoned baby girls, their mother having left them without a word, and the authorities decided to place them in separate foster homes. Lucas found the thought unbearable. The idea of these defenseless infants, once connected by the same womb, being separated and raised as strangers, seemed cruel and unjust. He understood loneliness, and he couldn't allow them to endure such an experience. Initially, people told him it was impossible. "You're a single man," they said. "Raising 1 child alone is challenging enough, let alone 3. But Lucas was undeterred. He visited the orphanage daily, cradling the tiny girls in his arms, whispering promises to them that they were too young to comprehend. He told them that if they would allow him, he would love them, protect them, and never permit them to feel abandoned again. The adoption process was tedious and exhausting, filled with paperwork, interviews, and skepticism from others, but Lucas stayed patient and unwavering. Each time he saw the 3 girls lying together in the crib, their little fingers instinctively reaching for each other in their sleep, his resolve strengthened. He didn't merely want to adopt them, he felt compelled to. They deserved to grow up together, to have a family, and he was resolved to be that family for them. The day he brought them home marked the first time he felt complete as he carried them into his modest house, 1 in each arm and the 3rd nestled against his chest. He realized his life would forever change. He was no longer just Lucas Morrow the carpenter. He had become a father, and for the first time in years, his home felt warm, filled with the quiet promise of a future based on love. Lucas Morrow had not been a rich man, but that had never hindered him from providing the girls with a life brimming with love, warmth, and unwavering support. His small home in the serene French town wasn't grand, just a cozy cottage with creaky wooden floors, old furniture he had crafted himself, and walls adorned with drawings, photos, and memories of childhood. But to him and his daughters, it was perfect. From the moment he adopted them, Lucas made a silent vow to do everything within his power to ensure they never felt deprived of anything, neither love, care, nor the opportunities life could afford. Each of the girls blossomed with distinct passions. Elena, the eldest, had always been a dreamer, the graceful one, her heart set on ballet from a young age. She spent hours twirling on the wooden floor of their tiny living room, arms reaching toward the ceiling, lost in the rhythm of the classical music softly playing from an old radio. Lucas watched her with quiet admiration, amazed by her sheer determination in her movements. Even when finances were tight, he managed to afford second-hand ballet shoes and classes for her because he understood how much it meant to her. Sophie, on the other hand, perceived the world through colors. She could usually be found by the window, paintbrush in hand, transforming blank canvases into vibrant masterpieces. When Lucas brought home scraps of wood from his workshop, she eagerly turned them into painted sculptures, breathing life into neglected materials. He encouraged her creativity, often hanging her artwork around the house and proudly telling visitors, "This one is a Sophie Morrow original." Clara, the youngest, was the quiet observer, the thinker. She was never without a book cradled in, her hands, her nose buried deep in tales of distant lands, brilliant minds, and extraordinary adventures. Lucas had built her a small bookshelf in the corner of her room, which over the years filled with second-hand novels found at flea markets. Whenever he saw her cozied up on the couch, completely absorbed in another world, he couldn't help but smile. Although their house was small and their budget frequently stretched thin, it never felt empty. It was a home brimming with music, the dash-ah sound of Elena's ballet steps echoing through the halls. It was alive with color, as Sophie's paintings brightened even the coldest winter days. It was enriched with stories, Clara's gentle voice reading aloud during the evenings. But most importantly, it was infused with love. Lucas never doubted for a moment that he'd made the right choice in adopting them. They were his daughters, not by blood, but by something much more profound. No matter what challenges lay ahead, he knew that as long as they had one another, they would always be a family. At first, it was merely exhaustion. Elena had always pushed herself hard in ballet, hours of practice, late nights perfecting her form, early mornings stretching before dawn. Lucas often reminded her to rest, to take care of herself, but she would just smile and say, "Just one more hour, Papa. I'm fine." But this time she wasn't fine. It began with small signs: sleeping longer than usual, losing her appetite, missing steps during practice. Then came the dizziness, the weight loss, the moments of struggling to catch her breath after even the simplest movements. One evening, while attempting to pirouette in the living room, she stumbled and collapsed onto the floor. Sophie and Clara rushed to her side, panic flashing in their eyes as Lucas knelt beside her, his hands trembling as he held her face. "Elena, talk to me," he pleaded. She forced a weak smile. "I'm just tired." But Lucas could see it was more than that. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and uncertainty as Lucas sat in the waiting room, his fingers tightly interlocked, his foot tapping nervously against the tiled floor. Sophie and Clara were beside him, just as restless. When the doctor finally emerged, clipboard in hand, Lucas could read the worry on his face. He knew the news was grim. "She needs a liver transplant," the doctor said gently, and those words struck Lucas like a hammer. He felt the air vacate, his lungs. His mind raced with thoughts of transplant surgery, the risks, the waiting lists. How long had she been suffering without telling him? His first instinct was to protect her, to do whatever it took to save her. "Her sisters," he stated quickly. "Can they be tested? One of them must be a match." The doctor nodded, and within hours, Sophie and Clara underwent testing. Lucas clung to the hope that one of them would be the solution, that the bond they had shared all their lives would extend beyond love into their very DNA. But when the results came back, the doctor's face was inscrutable. "Mr. Morrow," he said carefully, "I'm afraid neither of them is a match. In fact," he hesitated, then continued, "they're not biologically related at all." For a moment, Lucas didn't comprehend. Of course, they were related. They were sisters. They had grown up together, sharing childhood secrets, arguing over the last piece of cake, comforting each other through heartbreaks. They had been inseparable since the day he brought them home. But now, a few medical tests threatened to rewrite their entire history. Lucas glared at the doctor, his jaw clenching. "That doesn't matter," he stated firmly. "They're sisters, and they always will be." Yet deep down, he understood this revelation would change everything, not because he doubted their love, but because he feared how it would affect them. How would Elena, Sophie, and Clara respond to the truth? Would they feel betrayed? Would it fracture the unshakable bond they had forged over the years? But there was no time to dwell on that. Elena needed help. The revelation that they weren't. Biologically related hit Sophie and Clara like a storm they hadn't anticipated. For years, they had found solace in the notion that they were sisters in every sense of the word, and now science contradicted that belief. Sophie sat by the window of their home, staring blankly at the rain streaking down the glass. Clara paced back and forth across the living room, arms crossed, her mind swirling with questions that had no answers. "Why didn't he tell us?" Clara muttered, frustration lacing her voice. "Maybe he thought it didn't matter," Sophie replied, although doubt lingered in her heart. Perhaps he was afraid we'd feel different, but the truth was, they did feel different. It felt as if the foundation of their entire lives had abruptly shifted, leaving them unsteady. They still loved each other, but the thought lingered. If they weren't truly sisters, then who were they to one another? Lucas observed them in silence, his heart aching for them. He had done everything he could to give them a home, a family, and now he feared that what had made them strong was unraveling before his very eyes. Days went by with intense silence. Sophie and Clara avoided each other, absorbed in their own thoughts. But then everything shifted. The morning before Elena's surgery, they found her sitting up in her hospital bed, paler and frailer than they had ever seen her. The once vibrant and graceful ballet dancer now appeared delicate, her hands trembling slightly as she reached out to them. "Come here," she whispered. Without hesitation, they moved forward, each taking one of her hands. Her fingers were cold but steady as they intertwined with theirs. "I don't care what the tests say," Elena insisted, her voice soft yet resolute. "You're my sisters, and you always will be. Please don't let this take that away from us." Sophie felt tears prick at her eyes, glancing at Clara, who was already wiping hers away. In that moment, the doubt, the resentment, the questions, all of it vanished. They clasped Elena's hands tightly as if holding on to something far more significant than DNA. "We're not going anywhere," Clara whispered. Sophie nodded, leaning in closer. "We're family, always." The moment was sufficient to dissolve every trace of anger, every hint of hurt. What mattered wasn't the past. It was the love they had nurtured over the years. And then hope arrived. Lucas burst into the room, his face radiating relief, a look they hadn't seen in days. "We found a donor," he declared. Sophie and Clara's heads snapped up. "A distant cousin of mine," Lucas explained. "He's a match, and he's agreed to the surgery." It felt like the weight of the world had lifted from their shoulders. Clara let out a shaky breath, and Sophie felt her heart race. Elena smiled weakly. "Then I guess I have a second chance." Lucas cupped her face gently. "You always had one. We weren't going to let you go." The hours leading up to the surgery were rife with nervous anticipation. But when the doctors finally emerged, their smiles conveyed everything. "It was a success," the surgeon said. Lucas closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for weeks, while Sophie and Clara clung to each other, overwhelmed with relief. Elena would live, their family would remain intact, and despite what any test had declared, nothing could sever the bond they had fought so hard to cultivate. The days following Elena's successful surgery blurred into a series of recovery and moments of quiet reflection as she regained her strength. Sophie and Clara never left her side. They helped her sit up, brought her books to read, and ensured she had everything she needed. It felt as if the past weeks of doubt and anger had vanished. Yet, the truth lingered in the air, unspoken but undeniable. One evening, as they sat together in Elena's hospital room, Lucas entered with a hesitant expression. He settled into a chair and exhaled deeply, rubbing his hands together before he spoke. "I owe you all an apology," he began, his voice laden with emotion. "I never intended to deceive you. From the moment I adopted you, I knew you weren't biologically related, but I was afraid that telling you would make you feel less like sisters." Sophie and Clara exchanged glances, recalling the confusion and pain that had surfaced when they first learned the truth. But looking at their father now, his weary eyes and furrowed brow, they comprehended his fear. He had raised them, loved them, and dedicated his life to keeping them together. "I should have trusted you," Lucas continued. "If you ever wish to explore your past, where you come from, I won't stop you. I'll assist you in any way." "I can." Silence enveloped the room as the weight of his words settled upon them. Yet for the first time, it did not feel cumbersome. Elena, still weak but filled with quiet resolve, reached for Lucas's hand. "You gave us a home," she said softly. "A family. That matters more than anything." Sophie nodded. "We may not share the same blood, but we share something deeper. Love, memories, a life together." Clara smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Elena's forehead. "We grew up as sisters. That's never going to change." Lucas's eyes shimmered with emotion as he squeezed their hands. "You three are the greatest thing that ever happened to me. No test can alter that." In that moment, any lingering doubts faded away. Their bond had faced a test, but it had not cracked. It had only grown stronger. In the weeks that followed, Elena continued to recover, and life gradually returned to normal. The house was once again filled with laughter, late-night conversations, and a palpable warmth of belonging. One afternoon, as the sun cast a golden light over their small town, Clara surveyed the family she had almost taken for granted. "We're lucky," she remarked, as Elena stretched her arms after finally being permitted to move freely. "Yeah, lucky to have each other," Lucas observed, his heart swelling with pride. No matter what had transpired, one truth remained. Family was not defined by shared DNA, but by the choice to stand by one another, always.